Hello and welcome to today's webinar. Good afternoon. It's a Monday afternoon, so welcome. Thanks so much for coming. It's great to have you here and excited to talk to you today about debunking some Power BI myths together. I am Phil Stevens and I'm from Altus Consulting. I just wanted to give a quick overview of a few housekeeping things to start with. First of all, yes, I am Phil. I'll be presenting today, but we also have Eva here from the Australasian Association of International Research, but we're probably just going to go with AIR for now to keep it short. But we'll be hearing from Eva soon. Just a couple of things as well. Obviously, this meeting's been recorded. It'll be available on the Altus website shortly after the presentation, should you want to share it with all your friends. And we also have a Q&A section at the bottom of the screen there. So if you have any questions during the presentation, once it comes into your head, feel free to place that in the Q&A section, and we have a section at the end of the webinar to cover any of those questions that might come up. So without further ado, I shall transfer over to Eva. Eva.
Thanks, Phil, and hi, everyone. Thanks for having me today. I really just wanted to, introduce myself and the association and its connection to Altus. So my name is Eva Seidel. I actually work at Flinders University, but I am a member of the executive committee for the Australasian Association for Institutional Research. Our association really covers anything to do with institutional research for higher education. So we really try and help the universities make good decisions, good business decisions. And so we cover things like business intelligence, planning, institutional surveys, and just general analysis. Our connection to Altus is long and very strong. They have been a platinum sponsor for our association certainly last year, and have been sponsors with us for many years. And I think where our connection has gone for almost 25 years. But yeah, we've really leveraged Altus's skills and expertise over the years. I think most institutions, if not all, have lent on those expertise. And so we're really, really proud of our connection to Altus and really hope that it continues. But yeah, Power BI is really our jam. We use that tool quite a lot in our industry, and yeah, grateful for Altus to put together a presentation like the one today. So that's it from me. Thanks for having me, Phil, and I'll hand over back to you.
Thanks so much, Eva. Definitely, I echo that. With Altus, we work very closely with yourself and the institute there. So and it's been a long partnership, and one that will definitely continue. And you probably might have seen both of us actually at the AIR Forum last year in Melbourne, where we spoke again about similar concepts around Power BI and stuff. And this kind of bred into what we're going to talk to today. So let's kick that off. So just an intro on myself. Yes, I am Phil Stevens. I've been working at Altus now for almost 6 years, but I've spent my entire career working in data and analytics. It's all I've ever known. It's all I've ever loved. And yes, and through my it's over 15 years. 15 years as being very nice to myself there, but longer than that, working in data and analytics. And through my career, I've worked from all spectrums of where data analytics fits, from all the way from, we ingest data into our platforms, and then we obviously make transformations. We work with data, we visualize that on the back end, and we're going to talk a lot to that today. But yeah, I've worked across the whole spectrum basically of data and analytics. So it can come from a strong platform at any of those touch points. But yeah, nowadays I find myself doing a lot of strategy and architecture work, but basically love data. Let's talk data. That's what I'm all about. And going into just talking a bit about Altus history as well. Like Eva mentioned, yeah, we've been around for over 25 years in the data and analytics industry. And yeah, we've got a lot of our staff that have actually been there since pretty much day one as well. And yeah, so we've got offices throughout Australia in Sydney, Brisbane, and Melbourne and Canberra. And we've also got a New Zealand presence as well, which is where our managed services runs out of. But we also have consulting out there as well. And we work with institutions in higher education in both Australia and New Zealand. And we have worked in the UK as well with other institutions over there. We have over 160 consultants now over at Altis Consulting. So again, depth of experience and knowledge. We all talk to each other. We learn so much from each other. And important to mention as well with vendor independence. So what we mean by that is kind of on the right of the screen here, you see we've got a lot of partners in the industry with, you know, Microsoft's AWS and et cetera, that we partner with, but we basically work with whatever tools and platforms that you use as well. We don't on-sell any of these platforms. So whatever you're using, we've used it before, no doubt, and we've got expertise there. So just covering that we do work with a wide selection of platforms as well, even though today we are definitely talking quite strongly on the Microsoft platform and Power BI as a service within that. Underneath everything that we do at Altis as well, worth covering that we connect with courage, heart, and insight. And what that means is that all of our consultants, we have the courage, we try to have the courage to tell you when we see things that might not be right with what you're doing, or if we see areas where you can improve, we have the courage to raise that with you and the heart to take you through that, rather than just going, well, that's wrong, you're not doing that right, you should do it better. We go, no, we can see an issue here and we want to help you through that. So having the courage and the heart to do that, and with the insight that we have with our 160 plus consultants that we have, we believe we have the insight to be able to help you with that as well. So that just kind of, that's the undercurrent of how all of our Altis consultants work together. Another one, this slide, you've probably seen this before if you've worked with our sales team before, but just covering off quickly that we work across, going kind of down the screen here, we do work in the advisory space, so we can help advise you on what's best for your organization, but we can also then go into the architecture. We can help you with setting the right strategy and platform for success, as well as then delivering that as well. We do work in the delivery space as well. And as I mentioned before, our New Zealand managed services team, I should also mention we're moving into Australia with managed services as well. But that team as well, we have that ability to, when something is delivered, or if you need help managing the ongoing support of your platforms and services, we can provide that as well. And basically, by saying we're a data and analytics organization, it explains most of what's on the screen here, but we work with all kinds of data, however you want to get it, wherever it lives, we bring that in to be able to create information for you through, like we talk about here, visualization and having literacy around your reporting within your organization. And then the analytics on top of that, right? The AI ML space is just growing huge, and we're a big part of that. We've invested heavily in that with our organization on how we can best assist you with your AI and ML journey that you're on, but also what we're going to be talking about a lot today around just getting that visualization best practice into your organization. And this is all for the purpose of getting those great outcomes on the end. That's the focus point, and that's where we need to deliver for you. And we understand that around, yeah, everything we usually do brings agility and automation to your organization. That's pretty much a given in the technology space, but working around the profitability and agility of your teams as well. And as with your institution or organization, that we can help you to be on the forefront of what's happening in the data and analytics space, and, you know, put yourself that competitive edge as well. We're all a part of that with everything we do, and that's the focus for us as well. Underlying all of this, of course, is strong governance and security that we can also help work with you on. And we have strong frameworks and training. We are a training organization that we can help you with as well. So that gives a nice overview of a lot of our products and services that we offer for Altis, in case you're interested. And you probably see your own institution logo on here. We work, like Eva said, and like we've been saying, we've been working in the higher education since day one industry with Altis, one of our strongest verticals we work with. And we love working in higher education. I personally have worked a lot in it as well, got a lot of experience there. And so you can see, yeah, we've worked with a bunch of institutions within Australia and New Zealand and the UK as well, it should be mentioned on top of that. But yeah, you probably see yourself up here, so we probably worked with you. But yeah, that just saying that we know higher education very well within Altis. So there you go. There's a bit of an introduction into myself and Altis. So this slide is for those of you that don't like surprises. That's not me, but I understand there's people that like to know what we're going to talk about before we talk about it. So here's a quick overview of what we're going to talk about today and some of the myths that we're here to debunk about Power BI. So firstly, we're going to talk a bit about how you implement Power BI in your institution or organization. And that's quite important to know. Well, you might have purchased Power BI, you might have rolled out Power BI, but how how are you implementing it with how you get data into Power BI, what you actually use it for, what your business teams use it for. We're going to talk a bit about that to start with and some of the myths to debunk around that. We're going to talk about self-service. I mean, we always talk about this. It was a buzzword. Now it's a necessity within your organization. We're going to talk a bit about how, I guess, you've got so much information now. Probably your analytics teams don't have the time to be able to be rolling out reports constantly on that, and how we're seeing so much more in institutions that our end users are actually starting to drive a lot of how we build reports and what we're actually going to be reporting on and how they can self-service them. So let's debunk some myths around that. Let's talk a bit about reports versus storytelling. I think one thing I've seen a lot in higher education at the moment is we're having this growing need all the time to have these regulatory reports out there, and those are reports and they meet a need, and that's definitely important. But let's also talk about how we can use Power BI for storytelling purposes. So our users might want to drill into information to find out more themselves and maybe direct themselves about how they find information in a report rather than just jumping in and looking at the numbers in front of them on the page. It'd be an interesting one to talk about. We're going to talk about speed of delivery. So these are a lot of these points are based on what I've seen out there. And this is definitely one where we just can't get enough reports out there quick enough. How can we speed our delivery of analytics and reports and insights to our organization? Let's bust some myths on that one as well. And then finally, we're going to talk a bit about licenses and usage. We have a lot of questions that come to us around. I know I've got a lot of people using Power BI, but what are they doing in there? I don't know. And I've purchased all these licenses and I don't know if they're being used or what's going on there. So we've actually got a tool at Altis with Power BI to help you with that. So we'll cover a bit of that as well, which would be great. So that's just a quick summary on what we're going to talk about. So let's jump on in. Looking good. Right. So why would we talk about debunking Power BI myths? I think I've spoken a little bit about this, but underlying everything I think that we do with higher education at Altis at the moment is that understanding data is becoming central. It's critical to your institution to understand how you're going to get insights and understanding from your data. So we know there's more and more systems out there. There's more and more data becoming available. And I think we've cracked or working very hard on the process of, well, all our systems correct? Have we got the right systems? Are they all connected to each other? Are we able to have our student information system, maybe talking to our course curriculum systems and our finance and HR systems? They're all talking together, but they're all generating their own data as well. And we actually need to bring that together and understand that. And I think Power BI, that's where it comes in, right? It's this understanding of your data. Yeah, fair enough, you've captured the data and you might have it all working well together and connected, but how can you then understand that? And I think that's why we need to really focus on getting Power BI right in our organization, because it sits right there on the understanding. That's what our front end users are going to see. That's how they're going to consume our data. So let's get it right. And I've done a bit of research with higher education as I regularly read things and watch videos on insights. So I think there's a lot going on in the higher education space with AI and machine learning. I probably don't need to tell you that. I think generative AI is having a massive impact on education as a whole. And I think, again, that's producing a lot of data for us where, yes, we've got the tools to try and help with how people are using generative AI to present an image that they understand something where they might not understand it. We might not have that physical proof that they do. They have captured the learning and understood it, but that's one side of the situation. But we also need to harness the power of that ourselves. And machine learning as a tool can crunch lots of data that we know we don't have the ability to do or the time or the resource to do that ourselves. And machine learning can do that for us. But what are you going to do with all the data that spits out, right? That's going to spit out a lot of insights. And Power BI comes in there to work alongside what might be a successful machine learning implementation to take those that extra data you're creating and actually get some insights out of it. So that's where that might sit as well. We talk about gamification. This is an interesting one. I was watching a presentation actually from the University of Alberta recently on how they've implemented more gamification techniques in their curriculum within their institution. And just the concept of giving rewards, regular rewards and small rewards to students as they get work through their courses and the units that they succeed, so they can get that gratification as they take on the courses and the units. And I think Power BI comes in as well. Is this actually working for us? Are we actually implementing this correctly within our processes? That's just another challenge that's come in. And then you've got micro learning as well. Reading a lot about this. How do we break down these big courses into units, you know, and how does that work for us? I might want to learn agriculture, but first I need to master I don't know, soil quality, for example, before we move on to the next step. How are we breaking that down? Are we being successful with that across all of our courses that we offer? So all of this stuff, and we've worked with a lot of institutions around this concept as well with Power BI. The concept of adaptive learning, how do we make our courses and units actually work for each individual student? And my way of learning might be different to yours, and how do we accommodate that? And is it actually working for us? Like when we don't lick our finger and tell you which way the wind's blowing. We actually look at the data to work out if that is actually working for us and that we're getting the success that we need for our students in that area. And all of this funnels you towards the fact that our institutions, now we need to be data-driven. And I think we've known this for a while. Don't get me wrong. That's not a new concept, that we need to be data-driven in our decision-making. But what drives that? I think it's first the collection of quality data and the mastering and ensuring that the data we have is the right data at the right level to report on. And then on top of that, we have the best processes with data literate users using our reports for storytelling purposes. And that's how we can become a bit more data driven in our decision making and in our reporting across all of our different departments within our institutions. And all of these kind of funnel you towards that concept, I think. So I think that's why we need to talk about this concept of debunking our myths in Power BI and getting Power BI right within our institutions. It's an important topic. That's why there's so many of you here today to learn about this stuff. So let's just jump straight into that. Let's talk about Power BI implementations. So how is Power BI implemented within your institution or your organization, and how are you working it? I've got a few examples here, just a few diagrams to explain how I've seen various implementations of Power BI. So the first one we've got here, so we've got source data. Data comes from all kinds of things, databases, the cloud, solutions that we've rolled out, and we have files. We do exports out of systems. Sometimes that's the easiest way to get hold of your data. We put that into a centralized repository, and then we do fantastic, data quality checks. We do transformations to our data. We join all of these different systems together, and then we create these beautiful data models. And there's a wealth of data modeling tools that we use. I've seen many different ones at different institutions, but we basically get our data model structure. It might be dimensions and facts, and we've got these beautiful centralized models that then we send to Power BI. And in this implementation, Power BI is pretty simple. It's just basically taking in our beautiful model and going, now let's create some nice graphs and tables and visuals on top of that. So there's that implementation of it. There's what we're seeing more in the cloud environment, this centralized image here of, again, source systems need to go to a repository, and then we create subject level views on top of that to send to Power BI. So we might have, I don't know, something around student success. That might be an area where we know we need some reporting. So we build ourselves a little view and send that off to Power BI. And then that represents that subject area that we can then hopefully reuse for other reports or promote for self-service, whatever it might be. So again, similar to the first diagram, but this implementation is saying, well, we know we need to be a bit more agile to be able to create multiple different views. And every time something needs changing, we don't need to go back to the model and change everything. We can have these separate views. So we see a lot of this implementation. And then the third one as well, again, a fully valid implementation of Power BI is that you might just connect your system straight to Power BI. It has great connectors, right? It can connect to things like Salesforce, for example, or other solutions that you might be running. There's direct connections in there that can just jump in and read the data straight out. So why necessarily go through all of that extra process when we can do that? And I guess the one at the bottom there, the files going directly into Power BI. How often do we see this, right? That our users might get frustrated at the slow pipeline of reports. So there's the ability for them, if they have Power BI desktop, to connect a file in that they might have extracted out of a system and create a report from that. That's possible. And I think looking at these three implementation styles, this isn't everything, but these are the three most common, definitely. We have to allow for all three of these to a certain extent. We do need strong models with which our users can be confident of the quality of data coming out of it. We need to be agile with how we implement Power BI. And we also need to allow for the concept that our users are probably going to want to sandbox or play around with new data sources, or maybe even our analysts as a team, before we invest greatly in updating our big data model, we might want to create a little piece on the side in our sandbox environment to go, oh, there's probably value in this data. So we need to allow for all three of these things and all the approaches, I guess, with our implementations. So let's talk a few points on this. I think, first of all, we need to realize, and this talks more to the first diagram there, that Power BI is now powerful, if you allow the play on words there. Power BI, maybe 3 or 4 years ago, when a lot of these implementations were created, we were always scared about sending too much data into there. It just wasn't powerful enough to crunch all our numbers for us and to process millions of rows of data and allow that to refresh on a daily basis. I guess one point to be made is that Power BI has developed a lot since then. And now it can crunch the big numbers. So perhaps you can put a bit more trust into Power BI within your implementation to maybe create a lot of the metrics, maybe work on your DAX capabilities to be able to generate your metrics. And then when you're building your semantic models, or data sets as they used to be called, you can put a lot of logic within that particular semantic model for then users to go and use. So Power BI is powerful. And with that is that governance is key. So how many times do we go into organizations and see Altis and see hundreds of workspaces all over the place? And it started with the great idea of, oh, we'll split this out. We've got groups of different users and we'll use a workspace for each one of those. And then we'll have all our data sets within that and it'll work great. And before you know it, it's got out of hand, especially if you give your users the ability to, create apps or create their own reports from data sets. Governance is key to this whole process, that it doesn't really matter what implementation you're looking at if the governance is there to control that it's done correctly. And there are tools, like I mentioned, within Power BI to help manage that. We've got apps that you can roll out for your users, so they just see what they need to see in one space rather than having to skip between workspaces necessarily. If you harness the true power of semantic models, you should be able to reuse those on an ongoing basis so that you're not having to manage your data models outside of Power BI. So there's tools to help that. And the last point here is so important to remember. I'm just letting you know now, this is going to undercut everything I speak of today, is that users want to experiment. Users are getting better at literacy with data. They're understanding how to drag and drop fields in, create reports. They understand what a dimensional model is now. And if not, we can train them as such. But we're getting this now more and more, that our users are getting keen to start creating their own stuff and start experimenting and finding insights for themselves within data. And we've got to allow for that. If we don't, again, we're going to get left behind, or they're going to find a way to do it themselves. We've seen that, right? That happens all the time with our users. So there's some points on the Power BI implementation. Hopefully there's something there that's spoken to you about how Power BI is implemented within your organization and busted a few myths around that maybe. And that, I guess, my last point there leads us into talking about self-service within your organization. We at Altis have created a fake university called Londonshire University, and I'll try and be a bit visual with showing you what I mean in some of these concepts today. So I'm going to jump into a Power BI window that we've got here. So we've created a fake university called Londonshire with a whole bunch of data on admissions in there, and we've created this report. So picture yourself as a member of Londonshire University team wanting to look at admissions. You've got this great report and you look to yourself and go, oh, this is great. It tells me a lot of information here. I've got all of my courses and the year-on-year applications numbers there. I've got all of the application process steps, where they're coming from geographically, and our responses to those, and all my KPIs at the bottom here. So great, loving this report. I can filter it. Here's my department, arts and law. Great, I can see all of that. Oh dear, law's gone down. I wonder why. There might be reasons for that. And we look into that. So we've got our report and we're loving it, right? But maybe there's more to it than this, where we can actually jump into the back end of Power BI. So we've got our data set, or our semantic model as they're now called, within Power BI that's powering this report. Our user wants to explore this data for self-service. So it's up there, right? It's available, and a user should be able to jump into that particular data set and click this explore the data and create a blank report. So now we're a user that wants to see a bit more. So we can see all of our different data that's connected to this semantic model, and we can play around with it. And with a simple bit of 101 training, in data literacy, they should be able to know, and Power BI training, of course, how to do a few things themselves, right? So they go, oh, let's chuck in a bar chart in here, and I know that this is my fact table, and I want to look at application count. So I'll put that on my x-axis. Not difficult stuff, right? You should be able to learn this in a Power BI in a day course, for example. And then they want to say, well, actually, the age of the applicant is really important to me. And I know I can see that I've got an age band description in here. So I'll do that. Oh, great. So now I can at least see something here. I can see the breakdown that this is the most common age bracket or whatever it might be. And then they might want to create a filter here. Again, not hard to do. They'll just click on the slicer, and then let's split that out by, I don't know, the type of course that we've got. So let's just bring in the course name to make it nice and easy. So I can then look at, business, for example, and see how that impacts. Oh, look, there's less, et cetera, et cetera. All of that filtering that they can do, right? And they're starting to answer their own questions. So rather than raising a service request for a whole brand new report, we're giving them this ability, right, to be able to jump in and have a play. And, because we're an end user, we love our pie charts. Nice little touch. Hopefully that touches a few memories there for people. So we're going to make our amazing application count pie chart, and we're going to split that out. Let's jump into the applicant details. We might want to look at their nationality, for example. So we'll put that in there. And before we know it, we've got a little bit of an insight here in our lovely pie chart. I'm doing this in jest, by the way. I don't recommend this by any stretch, but we're able to know to exclude the UK because it's a UK institution, see where they're coming from internationally, right? And be able to look at that and go, oh, great. Well, that's an interesting impact on the application count by age band. Anyway, all of this to say that then they can save this report, right? And say, well, this is now my little space that I've got for playing around and answering a few of my own questions. I've been skilled up to be able to self-serve some stuff for myself. So Power BI allows for this, right? It's not really out of the box functionality to be able to enable that for your users. It's just a little bit of governance matched in with a bit of training, and our users can start to find out some insights for themselves, right? So, and that's just simply going from our admissions report here. And this is probably a good time to touch on this. At Altis, we do provide data literacy training. If you came to the AIR Forum in Melbourne last year, where I presented with the University of New England, we talked a bit about this, how we ran data literacy training for Altis, ran for University of New England. And we found there was not only hundreds of applications to get onto this training, way more than we had time and resource to actually deliver. It blew my mind. But not only that, but actually the outcomes from the data literacy training was amazing. The organization got to a certain level of literacy knowledge and Power BI experience to be able to create their own reports and go from there. And I think this is something to keep an eye out for with Altis, is that we deliver data literacy training, and it can be revolutionary for your organization to help you get up to speed with your users being able to get into Power BI, use a report to start with and understand what data is and how to get information out of data, but also the ability to actually self-serve. So it's possible, and we can help you with that at Altis with some of our data literacy training that we provide. So moving on, I think we're doing all right for time. Let's move on to reports and storytelling. So reports, as we know, I'm just going to give a quick definition on that. So a report for me is where you've got the numbers in front of you. Basically, you show someone a page and they go, great, that's my number. It's good, it's bad. And here's, a comparison number to last year, for example, and that's good or bad information. It's right in front of me and I'm just purely consuming it. Now, storytelling, what we like to say with storytelling with data is slightly different. It's where there's a myriad of options available to me in this report, and I'm able to actually interact with said report to find out what information I want. So let's again have a look. Here's a classic P&L report. The accountants amongst us are just loving this. It's got all the numbers you could ever want, all your actuals, all your last year-to-date budget, and the variance year-to-date from the budget, and then, sorry, this is the previous year's actual figures and variance. So you've got your numbers in front of you, pretty simple, tells you what it is, right? So I can see, well, this is red, so that's probably pretty bad, but I don't know why. Like I can, again, it encourages me to go, yes, so the currency exchange, well, I know there's been fluctuations in the currency exchange, so it's probably because of that. That's why the number's red, and I'm making that conclusion myself without really looking at being data-driven necessarily in that decision-making. I've kind of just made that call myself. So, reports are reports, and we have to give them for regulatory requirements we have, and that's huge, and I get that, and that's where we sit with reports, right? It just tells you the number, and for sometimes you don't want to give the extra information, so it's great for that purpose. But let's jump into another example of where we can start to tell stories ourselves with data. Here's a cool insight into female versus male enrollments in UK higher education. Some data we accessed, external data, to pull in just interesting information on the difference here between enrollment numbers and percentages between females and males in the UK for higher education for different subjects and courses. So within this report, again, it's very interactive, right? We've got the ability to see the numbers in front of us. We can see, oh, well, this is a big business and management's a very, a lot of people enroll for that course, and we can see that there's almost a 50-50 split there, and we can hover over these things. Allied health, great. A lot more females involved in that. And if we hover over this, it's going to tell us a bit more of the story. It's going to break it down by the study level, whether it's first degree, postgraduate, research, and all that information, right? And we can see there's certain insights there, and that's great. And we have these red dots as well. So that's going to tell me a story as well. And I don't know what that means, but if you hover over, it tells you what it means, that it's indicates a subject under a subject area where the proportion of females declined by 3% or more year on year. So you might look at this and go, oh, it's a 50-50 split, pretty much 48-52 split. But then we know there's more to it, right? Because we've got this red dot. So what then we can give our users is the ability to then drill through within Power BI. So I can drill through for this business and management to the subject level drill down. And then this might tell me a bit more information about why it's got the red dot. Like we can see here, I mean, first of all, we can see the percentage breakdowns at the next level below the course level. And we can see that, oh, well, this human resource management has got a strong proportion of female enrollment. That's great, good to know. Whereas, there's potentially underrepresented ones in finance. And then we can actually see, well, that's very good. But actually, others in business management, we've got a 56%, but it's actually dropped 5% year on year. So that's two different stories that I've just been able to tell with the same data. And this is, don't get me wrong, I know I'm being very simplistic here, but just to give you that concept that there's more to it, a number, than just looking at it. There might be more information. We actually might have to action something on this because we can see that, that there's been a decrease year on year. So there might be something to action there. Whereas if you're looking at this, you might not think there's something to action with that. So again, with Power BI, you have the ability to open up this world of storytelling. So you might, yes, create a report, but give your users access to actually drill down into the lower level details to see if there's more of a story to be told there. So there's another myth around maybe you're just rolling out a lot of Power BI reports without giving the interactivity and the drill down capabilities to your users. And that's something out of the box that you get with Power BI that we're able to help set you up with within your institution. So moving on now to the next piece, which is speed of delivery. And looking at the clock, I might need to speed up my delivery. So we'll jump into this as well. So what I'm trying to cover here is basically what I hear so often, which is that we hear, my analysts are taking too long to get the reports built for me. So we've got all of these requests building up and building up and building up for reports. And we just can't get to them because it takes us a good few weeks to roll out a new Power BI report. And that's the case, and that's fine. But maybe one of the symptoms of this is because time might be being wasted on recreating the unimportant stuff. And I tread carefully when I say unimportant stuff. But what I mean is things like, we all have those in our Power BI reports. We might have dynamic tiles that update depending on what year you've selected. So your title might say insights for year of, and then that updates. That's all great, and that's all stuff we have to keep doing in the background to make sure that the dynamic tile works and it's pointing to the right field. Or you've got your logos in the top corner, and you've got all your different sizing of boxes, and you've got your slices you've got to set up each time, and you might want to show or hide those slices, and all of this stuff. That's I know what I'm talking about with this, is that there's so many things that analysts have to just keep redoing each time we create a report, and there's a million design decisions that have to be done. And maybe we actually need a single design focus for our reports for the uninteresting, unimportant stuff, the general structure and the design of your report, and whether there's a heading or top or a logo. Maybe if we had a template that just did all of that for us, and we have a starting block from day one to start deliver our reports from, if we created a template for that, perhaps that could help us with the speed of delivery. And it might also help with our confused report users. Let's look at an example here where we've got Mary, Fred, and Joe, right? So we've got 3 analysts within our organization. They've created these 3 awesome reports. They're all great. They all tell the story. Our users love them. They might jump in and go, yeah, no, I've got my numbers down here. I've got my bar chart that's got a time series on it, which helps me see past and future data. And we've got this one's great. It's got the great coloring of active versus inactive reports and dashboards, things like that. So we've got all these wonderful reports that we've got. But imagine being a user that has to use all 3 of these in your day-to-day working. You have to remember for this one, I've got all my filters on this side, I've got to click, and this one I remember I press play, and this one actually is more interactive and I've got to drill through and do all that. And just imagine having these different designs to deal with. I think this can confuse our report users as well and might lead to a lower adoption rate of Power BI in our organization. Let's have a look at how it might look if we had a template rolled out. Again, the same reports, but just understanding that with a bit of design thinking and a bit of templating, we can actually roll out similar, faster insights to our teams, because we actually had a lot of stuff already set up from day one, and they just had to add data to it to be able to, you've got your color scheme sorted, you've got the design spec sorted. So it's just, again, we're talking speed of delivery here. Let's help our analysts and our users that build reports just to start from a good starting block. And a good tool to help you with that potentially might be the Altis Power BI template. Now, probably a lot of you might know about this because we've rolled it out at a lot of institutions, and it's been a very successful product that we've worked with at Altis. Here's an example in front of us within Power BI of how a template might look for you. Again, fully customizable to your institution with branding or how you have the design of your reports, but at least having a starting block that you open up your template and you get this in front of you. So you've at least got a bit of design space to start with. You've got your dynamic title. So if you were to click on a year, it's going to say 2022 on there, an update for you, and everything's interactive from the start. We've got things like you've got your filter panel. Instead of taking up real estate on the page, why not just have it as a pop-out box? This would be painful to create if you had to start from scratch every time creating this, but with your template, it's already there. You just add your fields to that. So you've got your pop-out filters, you've got links to your data dictionaries that you might want to use. You've got information panels that in the background are finding out when the data set was last refreshed, who built the report, what version of the report it is. All of that is already built into your template. You might have a help panel here. So again, pops up and just gives you a few outliers of, well, this is what this report is, and this visual, and it tells you what it is, or any information can help with training or refreshing users' memory if they're on there, and you just have to click off and that's gone. So this is the Altis Power BI template, an example of it that we can roll out for your organization to help have a starting block with which to go from. And that actually exists as part of the overall Altis Power BI framework. And I'll just tell you a quick bit about this framework that we have as a product within Altis. So it comes with the Altis Power BI template, which I just showed you. We have framework documentation, which can help you around best practices for report delivery, which visuals to use, how to set up your data sets, maybe using things like parameters for narrowing down your data sets. We've got documentation about how to deploy checklists for UAT checklists and SIT checklists that you might need. We've got the Altis Power BI Insights tool that comes with that. I'm about to show you that, so I won't spoil that too much for you. And then we've got the Altis Power BI training as well. So that comes with it. So if we're implementing a framework for you, the training comes with that as well, because we know exactly how to train that particular product and each individual part of that. And then ensuring that when you implement a framework, it works for you, and we've got something to work from, and your users are trained to use that. So that all comes as part of the Altis Power BI framework. So I thought I'd just tell you a little bit about that. But that kind of leads me to the final myth to debunk. We're doing great with time, so that's good. So I've done well. Well done me. No, we're going to talk about licenses and usage. It's a key one that we see come up again and again. We want to make sure at Altis that you are getting the most out of your Power BI. And if you are a leader in your organization for data and analytics, you want to make sure that it's adopted well. If you're spending your time building things, you want to make sure people are using it right. And you want to make sure that the cost of your licenses of Power BI, which isn't necessarily cheap, is utilized. And actually you're getting the most from that. I'm sure you want to know and be able to prove potentially to your CIO or CFO, whoever it is, that the investment into this tool of Power BI is actually worthwhile because it's being utilized, and you've got ways to monitor that usage as well. Let me show you a couple of ways that we've done this with Altus, and we've actually implemented for some institutions and organizations as well, which is the Power BI Insights. So behind Power BI is a whole bunch of data, right? You've got all of your users, you've got their 365 accounts, you've got their licenses that have been applied to them, and you've got all of their activity. Big Brother is watching. Whenever you're Power BI, we're tracking everywhere you click and everything you do. So all of that data is somewhere. And what we've done at Altus is actually harness that data to be able to provide you with a Power BI Insights product or a set of pre-canned reports, which can point you to how your Power BI is being used. So look, we've got just an example dummy set of data here, just to give you an idea of how it all works. But within your Power BI, you've got your workspaces, your reports and dashboards and all of your users. So you might want to see the active versus inactive. So this particular service that we've got, for an example, is very inactive, but it's worth looking into. So maybe I want to hover over this particular workspace to see, well, it's got 31 reports. I've got 10 users that are viewing those. I've got one app that's going out from there and 28 data sets or semantic models, which are out there. I can also see my top 5 workspace users here. And just a note that this would be the username, but obviously in the dummy data, we're just using tokens, but it will be the username. So you'd be able to go, oh, well, this user here at the top, 347 views, they know what they're talking about. Maybe they're one of my champions for this workspace to be able to help me push it out to other people and maybe involve them in some of your presentations if you're releasing new material or whatever it might be. But you're able to then jump in and for that workspace, see all of the different users that are using that. It's all interactive to see that. You've got within that workspace 16 inactive reports and 15 active reports, and all of your dashboards and everything like that. So being able to see that information as well as what hour of the day it's being used, if that's important for your organization. Everyone's using it on Wednesday. It's a hump day, not only for the week, but also for viewing reports, it would seem. If there's a certain month of the year that's important for you, all of that information is there. And it's basically, we just connect your Power BI to this report and boom, all the data is there for you. So that's a pretty good way of looking at your data. And we also have, from the licensing point of view, pre-canned reports as well. So it's good to put a dollar figure, let's be honest, to your licenses to know if you've got certain amount of inactive usage within your organization split out by the license type. If you've got Power BI Pro licenses, premium per user licenses, and how many are just simply using the free version of Power BI, being able to assign the number of users to that and what's active and what's inactive, and being able to see that dollar value for the inactive or the unused premium per usage, which is the most expensive licensing that you might be using there. So being able to split that out is quite handy, right? And plugging this into your Power BI service might be of use to you. You can click here to see, I want to see all the people who've never used Power BI. Look at all this cost that I've got assigned to users that have never even used it. Does that mean I need to invest more in training or just speak to these people on getting that adoption up? Or is it simply they're never going to use it? So let's reclaim that £606 or whatever it is in dollars for you back to your organization. So again, another powerful tool, debunking the myth that you don't know. You never know how your Power BI is being used or how much it's actually costing you. We can actually, their data is there for that. And we can apply these reports on top of that for you to be able to see the breakdown of how licenses are being used within your organization. So that wraps up the final myth that I was presenting to you. So this is the time has come to talk about questions. So I'm going to jump in and see if I can see any of these questions that have come up at all in there. Here, what's the uptake on Fabric? A very good question. And it's, so for those who might not know what Fabric is, it's Microsoft implementation, basically the future of, it's kind of what they're doing with Azure now is pushing out into Fabric. So it's the ability to have your data lake and then your data lake house all in one platform, really, to then be able to deliver your Power BI on top of that. And Power BI sits just smack bang on top of Fabric. with that as well. So uptake on Fabric has been good. We've done actually at Altis as well within the higher education space. We've done a few proof of concepts definitely around Fabric. It only really just went to general availability recently, and through a lot of work that we've done, we've seen there's still a few things to iron out, but we are actually implementing it at least one or two institutions at the moment, Fabric. So big uptake. And I think my advice straight up on Fabric with the uptake is, if you're Microsoft House and you're using Power BI, it just makes sense. Just know that one big thing is, if you've got workspaces that exist in your Power BI, they actually get sucked into Fabric as full workspaces. So you can actually have all of your data living within a workspace all the way through your pipeline within Fabric. So that's one really great thing, but it's where the governance comes in, right? I think your governance is going to have to step up a level if you're stepping into Fabric. So we've got more questions coming in. How many higher education institutions in Australia are using Power BI versus Tableau? Power BI usage is definitely overtaking Tableau. I think I can make that bold statement. We've worked, as I mentioned, with a lot of the higher education institutions, a lot more on Power BI, and actually we are migrating some from Tableau to Power BI. There's, dare I say it, there's a bit of licensing driving that with Tableau at the moment, getting a bit more expensive, and maybe Fabric is something that a lot of our institutions are thinking about, and we're doing a lot of migrations from Tableau to Power BI, and to my knowledge, none from Power BI to Tableau, if it's worth mentioning. But yeah, Power BI, it's a burning topic in higher education at the moment, for sure. Does Altis have a framework available for a proof of concept? Definitely, for Fabric, I'm guessing that is. We have been developing that at the moment. Fabric is still very new. We have what we call the DLA, which is the Data Load Accelerator, and we have that available in Azure, which we're now moving into Fabric, and we're actually working on that as we speak. So yes, there will be a framework available for POC there, but it's that's from the load aspect, but also from, like I mentioned, with this Altis Power BI framework, that's ready to go, and that's all Fabric friendly as well. So we're actually ready to go with that as well in Fabric to roll out. So hopefully that answers your question there. On the POC. So there's some great questions there. Is there any more questions coming in? If not, that's great. But thanks definitely for coming along to this this webinar. I just really hope you've kind of grasped some of my points around making sure that your Power BI is ready to go. It's ready for users to start to self-serve. It's ready for that sandbox environment to get users to actually experiment with. And you've got the governance in place for that. And for anything around that, letting you know that at Altis, we have those frameworks available for you. Just triple checking. Yeah, there's a question about recording. That'll be available definitely for you on the website. And we'll email all of that out to you as well. Just giving it a few more seconds for questions. Doesn't seem like there's any more. But yes, so I'm happy to call it here. Thank you everyone for coming. It's been a pleasure to present to you today. Thanks again to Eva for giving us that introduction, and thanks to AAIR for working with us at Altis and giving us the the opportunity to be able to share and to be able to come to the forum and share with you as well. Again, if you need anything at all from Altis, please do reach out. Any of our socials or via our website or by sending us an email. Any of those are fine to contact us on. No more questions. So I'm going to end it here. So thanks everyone for coming, and hopefully you've got something out of today's session. Hopefully see you soon.